Hi, everybody. My name is Carl Darden, and I'd like to welcome and thank all of you for joining us today on Navy Sports Central. I'm your host, and this is the official podcast of the Navy Sports Nation, where we take a deeper dive into Navy sports. Today, we're going to be featuring the Navy men's lacrosse team, and I will be joined by a special guest who's going to help me do that. Before that, though, we've got our sports update, where you'll hear how the men's and women's swimming and diving teams managed to defend their Patriot League titles. The men pulled off an amazing comeback, by the way. And we'll also look back at two key matches in the Army-Navy wrestling meet where the mids came from behind to earn their third straight star. All that, plus our Ask Me Anything, Question of the Day, and Mood Watch segments are coming up next. So stick around. It was a great weekend for Navy sports, and I'm here to tell you all about it. Okay, we are back at it here at Navy Sports Central. Whether you are a returning listener or checking us out for the first time, thanks for making us part of your day. I'm going to say right off the bat that this sports update is going to bring me even more than the usual amount of satisfaction. And the reason why is it doesn't just involve breaking down a couple of big wins over Army. It has to do with the fact that they happen in such dramatic fashion on the same weekend. So let's get right to them. First, we're going to talk about the Patriot League Swimming and Diving Championships. And the one thing I want to point out is that it's important to know the backstory here. Navy has simply dominated these championships. The women have won 10 straight titles and 21 overall in the 31 years since they joined. The men's team didn't become part of the Patriot League until the 2003-2004 season. That was 19 years ago. And all they've done since then is win every single league title heading into this year's championships. So the number stood at 18 in a row, which is the longest run of consecutive league titles in any sport. But while the women were favored to win their 11th straight crown, which they did, by the way, they beat Army by over 180 points, the men's title was nowhere near a lock. Just 2 months ago, Army had snapped Navy's 31-year winning streak in the star meets, posting a pretty solid 189-111 victory. The loss itself didn't come as a complete shock to me, and the reason why is because last year in Annapolis, the Black Knights nearly came away with the win, but the mids managed to hang on and keep the streak going by just a 16-point margin, 158-142. Now, while I had considered the possibility that the men's team might not be able to extend their streak to 32 this year, it didn't occur to me that Army would take the meet so handily. And that also meant that Navy's streak of 18 straight Patriot League titles was in jeopardy also. The Black Knights had waited a long time for this, and they were looking forward to ending the mids' dominance after taking it on the chin for all those years. At least one college swimming online publication called SwimSwam, weird name, picked Army to win, and pretty easily too. Here's a quote from their story published on February 13th, which was just a couple days before the meet. The meet simulator predicts Army will win the meet, and not by a small margin either, 739 to 680 points. It doesn't include diving, but when you factor in the returning points from last year, Army still comes out ahead, 801 to 786. Navy always shows up at conferences, and their streak gives them not only momentum, but a lot of confidence. Army will have to show up at their absolute best to beat Navy, but it does seem like a real possibility that for the first time in 19 years, there will be a new team atop the Patriot League. So that was a quote. Maybe the Navy swimmers considered that bulletin board material, maybe not. To tell you the truth, I'm not even sure they saw the story. One thing that was true enough was that this was one of those meets where the two best teams slugged it out over 4 days until only one was left standing. The mids got off to a quick start, posting wins in 2 relays and the 1-meter diving event to jump out ahead 147 to 99 at the end of the first day. But the way these meets are scored, teams with depth and a handful of events can really do well. Here, a first-place finish was good for 20 points, second place earned 17, third picked up 16, fourth place 15, and fifth place got 14 points. In fact, points could be earned all the way through the consolation finals as well. The winner, who was the 9th place finisher overall of the consolation final, gets 9 points, and then 10th through 16th place picks up 7 points all the way down to 1. Now, it was this depth that allowed the Black Knights to take the lead after the second day of the championships. They not only won 2 races, but they picked up enough points on the strength of their other finishes to take a 7-point lead over the mids. The third day saw the lead change hands multiple times, with Navy grabbing it back by a score of 627.5 to 594.5, and this set the stage for an incredible finish. Army was pretty strong in the distance races and in the 100-yard backstroke, and they did well enough in the other events to take a 47-point lead with just 3 to go. But the mids made up most of that by earning 44 points in the 200-yard butterfly and scoring well enough in the 200-yard breaststroke to take a 4-point lead into the final event. It was the 400-yard freestyle relay, a race that Army had won in the star meet just over 2 months ago. So it had all come down to one race. A win extends the streak, and a loss ends it. And Army had every reason in the world to be confident. It was a clean start, and Navy's Jonah Harm had the leadoff leg. He did his part, finishing ahead of the Army swimmer, but Loyola had the overall lead. Navy sophomore Austin Lockhart was next into the water as soon as Harm touched the wall, and he took over first place by the time his leg was finished. When his classmate Andrew Everett started the third leg, Navy had the lead by just 0.15 seconds over Army. Everett managed to build on that lead, which was up to half a second when Garrett McGovern went into the water to swim the anchor leg. But it didn't last long. The Black Knights standout swimmer Owen Harlow tracked McGovern down and took a tenth of a second lead with 50 yards to go in the race. Now, by now, I'm totally caught up in the drama. The two swimmers were right next to each other. McGovern was in lane 5 and Harlow in lane 4, and they were in a dead heat coming off the final turn. So with each stroke, my face got closer and closer to the monitor. I was watching it on ESPN Plus, and I was trying to figure out who was ahead. And with about 20 yards to go, it was still anybody's race. I swear my nose was practically touching the screen with less than 10 yards, and it looked like McGovern had retaken the lead, but with all the water splashing around, you just couldn't tell who touched first until you saw the swimmers look up at the scoreboard. And that's when you saw that McGovern had done it. He won by just 34 100ths of a second, and the mid's total time of 2:54.09 was 0.59 seconds faster than the meet record, which was just icing on the cake. The Navy team went absolutely crazy, while Army was pretty much stunned. I don't think it ever entered their mind that they would lose the race with the lineup that they had. But the mids thought differently, and thanks to Jonah Harm, Austin Lockhart, Andrew Everett, and Garrett McGovern, the Navy men's swimming and diving team had made it 19 Patriot League championships in a row. I got to tell you, that was an incredible performance. Now, if that wasn't enough drama for one weekend, the Navy wrestling team delivered another dose of it on Sunday afternoon. They traveled up to West Point to take on Army in their annual star meet, and back in 2021, the Mids were trying to snap a 4-match losing streak to the Black Knights. For decades, this rivalry wasn't even close. Navy had won 49 of the first 60 meetings, and there had been 5 ties. But again, it had been pretty rough sledding since 2017. The Mids had dropped 4 in a row, and Kerry Colott, who was in his first year as Navy's wrestling coach, brought his team up to West Point in the middle of a pandemic, hoping to get things turned around. Going into the last match, the Mids were sitting on a 3-point lead, and Coach Colott sent out freshman Andrew Cerniglia at 157 pounds, with the team needing a win to clinch the star. And Cerniglia did not disappoint. He just totally overwhelmed his opponent, winning by a major decision 14-3, and the Mids were back on the winning track as a result of their 20-13 victory. Last year, they made it 2 in a row, winning 22-9 after spotting the Black Knights to a 6-0 lead. So this year, things were going to be a lot more interesting up at West Point. You'll recall that during the pandemic, a lot of the sports didn't even have fans at the games. It was just basically athletes and coaches. That wasn't the case this year because Christie Arena was just rocking. And you could see it too. When I was watching some of the highlights, it was really, really loud. And I'm sure it got even louder after the Black Knights jumped out to a 6-0 lead again after winning their first 2 matches. But then the Mids took the next 3 to go up 9-6 after Grady Grice defeated his opponent 4-0. Army got the lead right back, but then Brendan Ferretti continued his outstanding freshman season by winning his match in the final 20 seconds to give the Mids the lead again. Ferretti that guy is lightning quick. I mean, it looked like in that third round, he was just kind of playing things out and looking to go into overtime. But just in a blink of an eye, he just took a shot at the leg and he got a hold of it, picked that guy up and put him on his back. So Ferretti gets the takedown for 2 points. And then he got an additional 2 points for a near fall, which basically means the opponent's back was exposed. And that gave him a 7-3 lead, and that pretty much just closed things out. So just that quick, Ferretti went from being tied at 3 to taking that critical 7-3 decision. The Mids were still up 15-13 going into the last match, and you guessed it, it was at 157 pounds. So once again, Andrew Cerniglia took the mat with the star on the line. This was nothing like the match 2 years ago. Cerniglia hadn't wrestled in nearly a month because he was trying to heal from an injury, and through the first 2 rounds, it was very tight. In fact, the Army wrestler Nathan Luquez took a 1-0 lead after an escape midway through the second round. Cerniglia did tie it early in the third, and it looked like that match was going to go to overtime as well. But with less than a minute to go, Cerniglia scored a takedown to go along with a near fall to go up 5-2, and then he added another takedown with less than 15 seconds left to seal that 7-2 win. And that one was sweet. I mean, I'm still trying to figure out how he did it. He was behind the guy and ended up just like doing a complete somersault to put the guy almost on his back. But that was good enough for the Mids to take the meet 18-13, earning their 3rd consecutive star. And you should have seen the team just mob Cerniglia after that final match. I think more than anything that they were just thrilled to death for him because of the fact that he's just been battling injuries for a decent part of the year. So, That gives Navy a 10-7 lead in the Star Series, and believe me, that is huge. The spring season is going to be really tight, so being up by 3 at 10-7 is way better than sitting at 9-8. With 7 sports left, I like the Mid's chances to win at least 3 of them. I'm not really sure which ones yet, but I'm hoping one of them is Navy men's lacrosse because I plan to be out in Annapolis for that game in a couple of months. So that takes care of our sports update, but I'm going to go ahead and hit our Ask Me Anything segment before we take a break. And again, this was another light week for questions, but I did get a couple of good ones. The first was from Christopher Rowe from our Facebook group. He's asking me, if SMU leaves for the Pac-12, who is the best team to target to take their place in the American Conference? First of all, Christopher, thanks for the question. I appreciate it. Most of you know that the American Conference lost Houston, Cincinnati, and Central Florida this year. That dropped them to 8 teams temporarily. But then they went out and added 6. They were Charlotte, the University of Alabama, Birmingham, the University of Texas, San Antonio, North Texas, Rice, and Florida Atlantic. So that puts the conference at 14 teams. Now, if SMU departs the pattern, that'll drop them to 13. And I don't know about anybody else, but as long as a conference has at least 12 teams, I'm in favor of standing pat. And I think one of the reasons that the AAC recruited those 6 teams was to prepare for the possibility that at least 1 or 2 were going to go somewhere else in the coming years. Now, I have heard talk about trying to pull in teams like New Mexico or Colorado State, but to be honest, I hope they don't do any of that. Let's just go with the teams currently in the conference, whether the Mustangs leave or not. You can still have 2 divisions with 13 teams, and the fact that one will have an odd number doesn't really matter. So that's my answer, Christopher. I vote for just moving forward with these teams, regardless of what happens with SMU. Newton's second law, which obviously states that for every action, there's an equal and opposite reaction. That doesn't always have to apply when it comes to college football and this, conference carousel that we see coming up every couple of years. Our next question comes from my old pal, W.T. Dorr. He asked me, hey, what's your take on this new Navy lacrosse facility I'm hearing about? How do you think it will impact the program? Mr. Dorr, thanks again for another great question. I'm happy to give you my thoughts here. First of all, for those of you who don't know, at the end of January, the Naval Academy announced that they would be building a state-of-the-art 33,000 square foot lacrosse facility overlooking the Severn River. The estimated cost is $22 million, and it'll be located right next to the Glenn Warner soccer facility. So pending approval by the Secretary of the Navy, the facility is scheduled to be completed by 2026. And just so you know, the funding came by way of a gift from an anonymous donor. So those are the details. Now, as far as what my take is, I think that this could be a game changer from a recruiting standpoint. I've always believed that when you consider the most visible sports of the academy, lacrosse is the one where the Mids have the best chance of winning a national championship. An incredible facility like the one being proposed could attract even more top-shelf talent to Annapolis and put the Mids in contention. From there, it's just a matter of getting hot at the right time and then riding that wave into the NCAA tournament. Both the men and the women have gotten to the Final Four in recent memory. And by the way, my definition of recent memory is going back to the time since my kids were born. So my daughter was born in 2002, followed by my son a year later. And the men's team made it to the final before falling to Syracuse in 2004 in a game that went right down to the wire. And the women reached the Final Four after defeating North Carolina in the quarterfinals in 2017 before coming up short against Boston College. Look, I think lacrosse is the one sport where the Mids can not only compete at an elite level, but they have a legitimate chance of winning a national championship if a few pieces of the puzzle fall into place. And the addition of an amazing facility like this is one of them. We'll be right back. All right, it is time for our deep dive segment. And like I mentioned in the opening, we're going to spend some time talking about the Navy men's lacrosse team. And we're joined by a very special guest to help me do that today. He is from the class of 83 and played goalie while he was at Annapolis. Now, I didn't know him at the time that I was at the academy, but our paths did eventually cross at HT-18, where we were both helicopter flight instructors, which, by the way, was probably the most fun I ever had in the Navy. And I was also honored to be the best man at his wedding. So I'm extremely happy to have my friend Bob Carolla join me today to talk some Navy lacrosse. Bob, thanks for stopping by today. I'm really looking forward to getting your take on this 2023 version of the Navy men's lacrosse team, and I appreciate you taking the time to visit with us.
Thanks, Carl. It's great to be here.
Now, you are originally from Long Island, and that's where kids tend to pick up lacrosse at a pretty early age. Was that the case with you?
Absolutely, Carl. My friend Dominili, his dad was the head football coach at CW Post College up there on the island. And a couple of summers, I got a chance to work their football camp in the equipment room. And I saw this thing on the wall, and it was like, I'm like, what's that? That's a lacrosse stick. Long story short, my friend Dom was able to procure a couple of sticks from the equipment guys at CW Post College, and he gave me one. And we started throwing the ball around in, the fourth, fifth grade time frame. And by the time we got to junior high school in seventh grade, we decided we were going to not play baseball anymore and play lacrosse. So my first year of organized lacrosse was junior high school in the seventh grade.
All right. That's interesting because in kind of a similar story, I first saw a lacrosse stick when I was in the ninth grade, I think. And I had a couple of buddies who ended up playing, and they tried to talk me into playing as well because I had a lot of fun throwing it around with them. But I was firmly entrenched in baseball, and I guess I was like too afraid to change. So I just kind of stuck with it. Now, if I could start over from that point, I would have switched sports in a heartbeat because I ended up playing a little bit later on in life, and it was just so much more fun. So now you're all in at the junior high level, and of course that continues all the way into high school. At what point, when you were in high school, did you kind of see the Naval Academy as a potential opportunity for you to go play?
So my high school teammate, Rich Wayman, was a year ahead of me at Ward Melville High School. And the Naval Academy was really into recruiting him to play for them on their team. And he ended up going to NAPS and then becoming a class of 83 member with me in July. But after they started recruiting him, I started looking into is the Naval Academy a place for me? And I was like, wow, yeah, I definitely want to continue in college. So I looked into it, and then it was a possibility. So,
right. And before we came on, you were relating a story about the whole admissions process for you. So I was wondering if you can kind of describe that a little bit. And the main reason I wanted you to point it out is because it does speak to having somebody being able to go to bat for you to kind of speed things up.
Okay, the process back then, and I know it's very different now for athletes. Basically, if you're an athlete interested in going to the Naval Academy, you have to go through the same process as everybody else. So you got to get your grades in academically, apply to the academy. You have to get a nomination from either a congressman, senator, vice president, etc. How all that works. In my case, my congressman Otis Pike just gave everybody an SAT type test, and the top 10 people in that test were offered a nomination as an alternate, and I got one of those. So after that went on, I was called into my official visit in February of my senior year. Did the whole weekend, got to see the facilities, hang out with the midshipmen for a weekend, and at the end of the weekend, we all had our debrief with Coach Slaza, and he asked me, "What do you think?" And I said, "Hey, Coach, this was great. If I get in, I'll come." So lo and behold, about a week later, since all my other stuff was there and ready to go, the Naval Academy came back and told me that, "Yep, you're in." So basically, I'm 100% sure the coach went into admissions, looked at my record, saw that I had everything I needed, and he said, "We want this guy. He's coming." And I got the nomination about a week after my appointment, the week after my visit.
Yeah, that's a great story. And it's interesting too, because having been a blue and gold officer, I know that when different candidates' jackets get reviewed, their profiles get reviewed, it's almost kind of a random thing. So it always helps when you have an advocate that can go in there and kind of get you that expedited review, so to speak. So thanks for sharing that story. All right, so what I want to do now is just kind of go back to your time at Navy and talk a little bit about some of the teams in the early 80s there, because there were a couple of good ones, right?
Oh, yes, sir.
And I was wondering if you could kind of talk a little bit about what some of their strengths were and that sort of thing, because I think it was your sophomore year that they did make it to the semifinals. Is that right?
That's correct. We did a little in our pre-talk, and I didn't mention this, but when the NCAA tournament came into play, I think it was in around the 72 season when they became the lacrosse became an official NCAA sport. The Naval Academy made it to the NCAA playoffs every year up until our senior year in '83. So we were good. The strengths of those teams, it's you follow sports, and it's the strength of every team at Navy. We're going to be athletic, we're going to be fast, we're going to be strong, and there's going to be no quit at any one of those athletes. And that was us back in those days.
Yeah, it's interesting that no matter how much Navy athletes have changed through the years, they're clearly bigger, stronger, and faster, but the one constant has always been that they don't get outworked and they just keep coming after you until the clock shows all zeros. Just thinking back to those teams, what did you like to run on offense and defense? I'm more of a defensive guy, so I guess we can start there. Was it a little bit of zone worked in there, or is it primarily man-to-man defense?
No, we did. No, it was mostly man-to-man.
Uh-huh.
And that was we were good at it. We had our defenders and our middies back at the time all had good feet, good stick work. The positioning was really good. And the game has changed. Back in our day, you could really lay a hit on people and, basically almost, kill them with a hit. And we had guys that were really good at headhunting. So we were a feared team. We were always the more physical team. We played a lot of body checks, an intimidating style man-to-man defense, whereas other teams were not like that. Good teams came in knowing they were going to get hit and hit hard. Nowadays, the rules have taken some of the hitting out of the game with the rule that you're only supposed to hit a guy as hard as you need to knock the ball loose. You can't just, take a 5-yard running start and knock the guy dead to rights. So you can't do that anymore.
Right. And I have noticed that in the last several seasons because I just remember you and I actually went to one of the Army-Navy lacrosse games back, I think it was back in 99 when I was living up in Baltimore. And in fact, Navy won that game 11-9, as I recall. But there were some incredibly hard hits in that game. And I just remember a couple of guys just getting really laid out. And clearly, you just don't see that anymore. So you're right.
Well, it's the concussion thing. It's not necessary to hit that hard. And for safety of the players, you probably shouldn't. And it does happen. You've noticed some of the new calls. I mean, you hit somebody in the head, you're going to get a full, a minute or 2 or 3 or 5 or whatever it may be. And the ref is going to give the old signal over the head, non-releasable.
Right.
So that means the offense can just go and score 10 goals on their man-up opportunity, and the guy's not coming out of the penalty box right. Because the hit was egregious. So they're really trying to protect players from getting hurt. And, just from my time to now, the players are all bigger, stronger, faster. A guy that my size, 5'8", 170 pounds back in the day, could do really, really well at the Division I level. You look at Navy's midfielders now; they're all like 6'3", 6'4", 200 plus pounds.
Right.
The guy my size not playing. The guy my size not playing D1 at this time.
Right.
Not happening.
Right. So let's talk about one of those players who at the time was pretty big for a midfielder. I'm sorry, for an attackman, and that was Sid Abernathy. He was a class of 81, and he was recently inducted into, I believe, the Chesapeake chapter's U.S. Lacrosse Hall of Fame. So, and he was a local guy there in Annapolis. So, like I said, I didn't get to watch him much because, I was busy trying to just get through plebe year and stuff like that. But
yeah, I get that.
But yeah, what was he like to watch?
Oh man, Sid was phenomenal. He had quick hands, quick feet. He was able to drive the goal on either side and either beat his defender and get a shot off, or draw the double team and then dump the ball either to the crease attackman if the slide came from there, or the wing midfielder if the midfielder slid down to try to pick him up. His vision was awesome. He was always able to find the open guy or take the ball to the goal himself and get a shot off. Too much. Good stuff.
Yeah. So it sounds like, I mean, you just named off a bunch of things that, clearly are going to be key things to look at in an attackman in particular. But now let's go ahead and just talk about the different positions in general. Okay. And we'll start with attackman since that's where we left off. But I know that you coach at the youth level a lot, and certainly the skills are just starting to kind of develop there. But when you're thinking about, players, and then as you watch players develop, or even when you're watching college lacrosse on TV or something like that, and you're looking at how the attackman plays, what are some of the things you look for that say, okay, that guy, he's got a pretty good handle on things?
Yeah, the first thing I look for in an attackman is the ability to see the whole field. A solid attackman is going to be able to control the ball, look up at what's going on around him, and see where to move the ball next. That's going to make it's going to put the team in a better position to score a goal. So in Sid's case, Sid was so good at driving the goal and forcing the defense to move that if they didn't move, he was going to score. And if they did move, he was able to dump the ball off. So vision's a big thing. stick work, and pinpoint passing would be the three things that I would look for in an attackman.
Okay. All right. Good. Now let's move to midfielders. These guys are a little bit different because they basically just run the whole field. So how do their responsibilities differ from an attackman, and how are they the same?
The same skills for a midfielder when they're actually playing offense is they need to be able to control the ball, move the ball to the right person, or go to the goal themselves. So that's pretty much the same with both of them. Where they differ is when the defense gets possession of the ball, the attackmen are, yes, going to press the defense, but the midfielders also have to get back on defense and stop the transition game. So they have to be able to, quickly retreat and be fast to get into the defensive part of the field. Some of the new nuances in today's game is that you see teams have offensive midfielders, then they have long stick midfielders, so those guys will play mostly defense, and then you've got the short stick defensive midfielders. So what you see most teams doing nowadays on the transition phase from offense to defense, the offensive middies will do their best that they can to stop a transition, but once that transition stopped, you're going to see them run off the field, and then a defensive mid is going to come on, whether it's a short stick or a long stick.
Got it.
And it's the same thing for the opposing team. So if you're playing defense, your defensive team, as you transition to offense, once you're not in the transition anymore, those guys come off and their offensive midfielders come on the field. So it's like just a fire drill at the substitution box where you've got people running off, people running on, and the teams that do that very well actually are able to generate an advantage from that.
All right. That sounds really good.
Can I break in here and just continue on another point?
Sure.
Back in the day, when I played, and probably through most of the 80s, maybe before that, midfielders were they're staying on the field. They're going to, like you're trying to get at. So you're playing offense, and then the next thing you know, you're playing defense. And then as the number of skilled players increased, because lacrosse is still one of the top growing games in the country, as you were able to get more people that were, strong, fast stick skills, whether they were better at defense or offense, the coaches were trying to get these people more onto the field. So, the 20-year transition from the 80s to the 2000s saw, the long stick midfielder develop, the defensive short stick midfielder develop. And now it's a case of, you got offensive middies and defensive middies. And the other thing that came out within that 20-year period was the FOGO, the face-off, get-off guy.
Right.
So the center midi, he does the face-off, he wins the draw, and the next thing you know, he's into the substitution box for either an offensive midi or a defensive midi, depending on whether or not he won or lost that face-off.
Okay. Yeah, so talk about really specialized, huh? I mean,
yes, it's really specialized now. It's not like it used to be.
Right. So I guess that might answer my next question. Is it very common for these days for a player to be out there and he's got the kind of talent that he could play both positions? And would that ever happen anymore?
Ooh, haven't thought about it, but just from what I've watched recently, the only time I've seen people stay on the field is if they're forced to.
Okay.
So if the defense gets a good transition going on, those offensive middies are going to play defense until they get a chance to come off the fild.
Understood. Okay. Good deal.
So more people get in the game, but also, like we were talking about a second ago, so specialized now.
All right, now let's move on to defensemen. It's obviously, when you were playing goalie, those are essentially the three guys right in front of you. And we've kind of touched on defensive midfielders, but I'm mostly focusing on the long sticks now. What specific skill sets do you look for there? Obviously, a little bit difference in equipment, that sort of thing.
So, thing I look for in a defenseman most off is footwork. With good footwork, you can maintain your body position on an attackman, or if you get switched up to a midfielder, so that you can force him to go where you want him to go rather than where he wants to go. So if you can maintain your body position to force the attackman to turn and not let him do what he wants on offense, that's what I'm looking for in a defenseman. And then the other skill they need to have, they all need to be able to handle their sticks and clear the ball. So if you can't clear the ball, you're just going to give up too many extra possessions to the offense, and that's going to put you behind the eight ball.
Right. Okay. All right. So thinking back to your time at Navy, who were some of the guys that you liked having in front of you when you were playing?
Since I didn't start as a player, but when I got a chance to play with the first defense, I loved playing with Mike McLaughlin.
Okay.
He was fast, he was big, great footwork, and he was mean. He was mean. He would knock the snot out of you if he could. He was the guy. We were talking about the hitting. He was the guy that would wait up around the midfield line and wait for the opposing goalie to clear to a midfielder. So the guy's looking behind him like this. Mike's over here. As soon as the guy caught the ball, if he was anywhere near the midline, he was getting smushed. So, and that nowadays that hit would be a penalty for sure.
Right. Okay.
But back in those days, it was legal.
Right. All right. So that's a good recap of the different positions and some of the qualities they have to excel at the position. So now let's talk a little bit about just a few of Navy's players. I mean, I could go on. I'm kind of with lacrosse. I'm kind of like basketball and track. I can just yak about it all day long. But let's just pick about 4 players. We'll go with 3. We'll put 5 players. We'll go. I want to start with Xavier Arline, which, most people who hear that name know that he is a Navy quarterback. Finished out the year after Ty Levitai got hurt, and he started the year before that, the last half of the season. But a lot of people don't know that he played a lot of lacrosse in high school, and in fact, he turned down an opportunity to play at University of North Carolina because they wouldn't let him play both sports, football and lacrosse. And that was a promise that Coach Niamatololo made to him when he was recruiting him. And with Coach Newberry, he's decided to honor that as well. So Arline broke into the lineup last year a little bit, but this year he's gotten off to a really good start. In fact, he currently leads the team in points. He's got 5 goals, 7 assists for a total of 12 points. And he's getting about 61% of his shots on goal so far. So is that a percentage that reflects good efficiency when it comes to shooting? Because I know that you have high volume shooters and then some that don't shoot as much, but they're able to get the ball on the cage, even though they don't score as many goals. So what's your thought on that?
Xavier Arline getting 60% or better shots on goal. That's awesome. Mm-hmm. As an attackman, he's always going to be covered probably by the other team's best defender. So the fact that he can get his shots off and he's that accurate is going to lead to very many scoring chances for him and great for the Navy team. Yeah.
And I was watching a little bit of the game against Queens because that was on ESPN Plus, and I caught some of the Hofstra highlights as well. One thing I did notice is that when he decides to shoot, that ball is out of his stick really, really fast. And he in the Queens game, he had this beautiful sequence where he took a cross-field pass and faked like he was going to shoot, and made that motion. Then he pulled back at the last minute and passed it across the field to Henry Tolker, who scored an end. So that was a really sweet assist. It kind of goes back to that vision that you were talking about before. Okay, so when we look at here's another player that actually you had a chance to play with his dad. So I'm kind of curious to get your take on how they compare in terms of their build and abilities and stuff like that. Patrick Skalniak is one of the team leaders now. He's a senior. And last year, he led the team in points with 48. He had 28 goals and 20 assists. So pretty decent balance there. And so far, he's got 6 goals and 2 assists this year. What was, you see him play, you played with his dad. How similar and how different are they?
I think they're really similar. They're both big. They're both strong. They both can shoot. I didn't want to stand in the goal when Phil had an open shot. It was just, okay, let me get out of the way. But you know what I mean?
Right.
Not fun. The only difference I can see between the two is Patrick's left-handed.
Oh, okay.
All right. If I remember correctly, Phil was right-handed.
Uh-huh. So is that as much of a factor in lacrosse as it is, say, like in basketball? When you're like halfway through a game, you realize that the guy you're guarding is like left-handed, or what do you think?
I don't think for field players it's a difference, but when you come up against a left-handed goalie, mm-hmm. that's a nightmare for some shooters because for a right-handed shooter, you want to shoot to the away from the goalie's stick,
right.
which would be over his left shoulder.
Right.
Well, now you've got this big lacrosse goalie stick sitting in the spot where you shoot all the time, and you see teams maybe take a quarter and a half to adjust to where they're placing the ball because the stick's on the other side of the goalie's body.
Right. You come off the field going, hey, that guy's got this stick on the wrong side.
Exactly.
All right. So let's move into defenders now. Jackson Bonnets is one guy I want to mention. One more offensive guy, Dane Swanson.
Oh, Dane Swanson.
Yeah. So you had a great story for me on that. So talk to me a little bit about what you know about Dane.
So I met Dane as probably a 6-year-old in the youth program down in St. Mary's County. He started playing lacrosse as soon as he was old enough to play, and he stayed with our youth program, oh man, probably till he was 10 or 11, maybe more, maybe less, but I don't remember. But about 2 or 3 years into his stay with St. Mary's Youth Lacrosse, it was quite obvious that he was going to be a good lacrosse player. Mm-hmm. And as he developed as a player, his family made the decision to start moving him to better clubs away from our county. And they actually eventually moved from St. Mary's for the 4 years to the Baltimore area so he could attend McDonough High School in Baltimore, which is a men's and women's lacrosse powerhouse there in the MIAA. Mm-hmm. So, yeah, too much. And now he's at Navy, which I just can't fathom. One of my players is actually there.
That's pretty awesome. Okay, now let's talk about a couple of defenders. One a long stick, and then one of the goalies. So let's start with Jackson Bonnets. He is a junior long stick defender who actually went to McDonough High School in Baltimore, the one you just mentioned. He is a world champion, actually, because he was on the under-21 lacrosse, World Lacrosse Championship team that the USA put out there, and they competed in Ireland this past summer. You already talked about the qualities that make a long stick defenseman so good. Now, let's talk a little bit about the one quality that you appreciated the most when the game was on the line. And you're there in the cage, you've got your 3 long sticks in front of you. What's the one quality that really stood out to you that a defenseman had to have if you guys were going to come away with that possession and eventually close out the game?
The one quality I my defenseman needed would be the ability to actually stop that offensive player in his tracks, force him to get rid of the ball. If say if it's Jackson Bond is Navy's best defender at this point, if he's on their number one attackman, if he can shut him down to make him pass, he's done his job. Okay, because then that's one guy that's not going to shoot that I have to worry about as the goalie.
All right, good stuff. All right, so now let's talk about the goalies. Pat Ryan is a senior from Groton, Massachusetts, and he's backed up by a pretty good freshman named Dan Daly. But anyway, last year, Ryan started every game, and he saved 53% of his shots, which was good for 4th in the Patriot League. And he's also number 2 in goals against average. So definitely a tough guy to get the ball by. And he's got pretty good size, too. He's 5'10" and 213. Ryan is off to a really good start this year. He was the goalie of record in 2 of Navy's first 3 wins. And right now, he's seeing the ball pretty well. I think his save percentage is sitting at about 75. Obviously, that's going to come down a little bit as time goes on. But the one thing I noticed, and I want you to kind of go into this a little bit more, is that he's got this knack for just stopping shots right in front of him. I mean, right on the doorstep there. And I wanted to know, from your experience, what are the techniques that goalies use to stop those kinds of shots? Because you figure, okay, he's got the goalie dead to rights. That's a 98% scoring chance right there. But it's not nearly that high. And so when you see such a situation develop where that shot's going to be coming from really in close, what do you try to do?
The way I played it is I tried to match my feet with the attacker's feet, and then I tried to match my stick onto his stick. And since my stick's a little bit bigger than his, the possibility that I'm going to force him to shoot in my stick is greater. So in order for him to beat me, he's going to have to change where he has his stick. And if I can match his stick with my stick, I'm going to win. If I don't match his stick, I'm going to lose, and he's going to score.
Right. And there's one other question I just kind of came to me, and this came from when I was just playing, club lacrosse as an adult. I started playing, I think it was right after, it was when we were at HT18 together.
Correct. I remember that.
Yeah, it was, Paul Mosey kind of organized that team. And I played defenseman to the extent that I could. I mean, I was new to the game. And
you did great.
Well, thanks. And I think that's because of the footwork skills I picked up from playing defense in basketball. I mean, I played a lot at the intramural level, and certainly that's not like, varsity or anything like that, but it is competitive enough. And you had some guys with some really good skills. And if you weren't ready to play defense, you could get embarrassed pretty quickly. So that's something I worked on quite a bit. And it really did benefit me on the lacrosse field. But one of the things, and I went on to play when I got off of active duty and moved to North Carolina, played with a team there. The goalie that we had on our club team was really good. He was this huge dude. He was like 6'6" and like 260 pounds, but he was cat-like quick, you know? But one of the things he always told me, because I was always just trying to pick his brain around, just because I wanted to be able to play better in front of him, right? And I always asked him, I said, what is the toughest shot for you to stop? And he said, it's the one where the attackman is behind the cage and he makes a pass to a cutting midfielder basically down the lane, and that I got to turn around and try and pick up from about 6 yards. And he goes, that is the toughest one, because it's just, your eyes can't track the ball that easily. You know what I mean? Do you concur with that? Is there a shot that it was tougher in your mind to handle, or was that basically the one?
No, that's basically the one, because the offense has all the advantage.
Mm-hmm.
The easiest shot for me to stop is the one where I'm standing still and I can just track the ball and move to where it is. If he's forcing me to move, I have no idea where I am in the goal, or at least not as much as I should. And once I turn, I have to pick up the ball and figure out where it's going to stop, and then get myself into position or just react to make a save. And that is probably the hardest thing to do, because it's all constant moving for me.
Right.
And it's very hard to cover that 6 foot square.
Yeah, I agree. And so when I heard that, I kind of thought about, okay, my head's going to be on a swivel just looking for cutters. Even if I'm on a guy, I'm kind of looking with one eye to see if there's anybody coming that might beat a midfielder. And then if I need to slide, I'll slide. Maybe that leaves my guy open, but for me, I'm going for the guy that's closest to the goal. All right, so that takes us through the different players. Thank you for that analysis, Bob. I appreciate it.
No problem. I'd like to add something about Pat Ryan that I noticed in the Mount St. Mary's game.
Oh, sure.
Yeah, so I was actually really impressed with his ability to control the rebound after a shot. He'd get the ball, he'd either catch it clean,
mm-hmm.
or he'd knock it down into the crease and pick it right up. And the other thing I thought was amazing was his ability to pitch the ball out to a midi on a break.
Right.
He was able to get it either down the middle or off to the wing, but really gave Navy a good chance in transition to score a goal with the way he was able to stop the ball, control the rebound, and pitch it out all within like a second and a half. Unbelievable. Really good stuff for him.
Yeah. All right. That's a good point. Thanks for sharing that. I tell you what, we're going to take a short break, and when we come back, we'll go ahead and finish up our conversation with Bob Carolla. All right, welcome back to Navy Sports Central. Carl Darden here with you, and joining us today is Bob Carolla from the class of '83, who played goalie for the lacrosse team during his time at Navy. So, Bob, thanks again for all your analysis and breakdown, and now it's time for a little bit of fun. I want to ask you some general questions around your experience playing both at the high school and collegiate level. So let's start with your most memorable win against Army, and I look back in the records, and there's a couple of them that might be pretty good candidates there. So I wanted to get your take on those, or one of those.
Okay, so I'm going to go back to the '81 team, which did make it to the semis. We played Army at Navy for the N-Star game at Annapolis. We lost.
Mm-hmm.
Dropped us. We were ahead. I think we were third or fourth in the rankings at the time, and Army was below us. It ended up, and this is, like usual, Army's late in the season. So that flipped us for when the rankings came out, or the seedings came out for playoffs. They were 4, we were 5, which made us go to West Point to play the playoff game for the quarters. When back then there was only 8 teams in. Not like, I think there's 16 now. But anyway, so we went back up to Army. They were pretty cocky that they were going to kick our butts. Mm-hmm. It didn't happen that way. So we were able to go up there, and we were able to, I think it was just a 1-goal win. I'd have to look that up. But we went up there and we beat them at Army to make it to the next round, which was very satisfying since we had lost the Star game, but we went up there and beat them in the playoffs.
Yeah, as a competitor, I don't think there's anything quite like getting that revenge win on the road, especially when it knocks the other team out of the playoffs. Okay, next. We may have touched on this already, but I'm just going to put it out there again. The player you like to watch the most on offense and on defense, and it can be a player now or a player from one of the past Navy teams.
Back in my day, I would like on offense. I would like to watch Rich Wayman play. He had the quickest feet and the quickest hands that I can remember. He would be able to cradle through a triple team and get a shot off and score. It was just unbelievable how he did it. It just amazed me how he could do that. On defense, and we talked about Mike McLaughlin before. Love to watch him on defense because I always knew he was going to knock the snot out of somebody. So watching him hit was just unbelievable.
All right. Best innovation to the game in the last 25 to 30 years.
Do you want to talk about game itself or like equipment? Can I do two?
Yeah. Let's do both. That would be great.
The best innovation for the game in the last 25 to 30 years is by far the shot clock. Because back in the day, you'd get like a 3 or 4 goal lead in the fourth quarter, and teams would be more than happy to get the ball on offense and just waste minutes and minutes and minutes, because if the other team doesn't have the ball, they can't catch up.
Right.
So even though there was a stalling rule in place, it took so long to implement that you'd still waste 5 minutes before you had to keep it in the box. Now with the shot clock, all that's gone, and you've got your 80 seconds.
Right.
And then the reset at 60, which makes the game go faster. Perfect. The other innovation is the gear. The gear is so much stronger, so much lighter. It makes, you don't have to worry about sticks breaking, and, breaking in a new stick in the middle of the season is the absolute worst thing you have to do. But nowadays, it seems the gear is just so much more durable, so much more light, and I think it makes the game better.
Yeah, I would agree with that. And I didn't. It's funny too, because the shot clock makes so much sense. Do you remember when they implemented that? I don't know for sure. I can look it up later, but yeah,
hasn't been long. The girls did it first. The girls' game changed the shot clock first, and then the boys did it right after, the year after.
Yeah, that's right. I did a quick Google search and found out that the women's game went to the shot clock in 2017. The next question, kind of on the heels of this one, is there a particular rule change that you'd like to make that you think would improve the game even more?
You sent me this question, and I've been thinking about it for days, and I really don't have an answer. I'm going to throw it back to you. What do you think they could do to make the game better?
Well, actually, I think I'm with you, Bob. And one of the reasons I posed the question is because I spent some time trying to figure it out for myself, and I couldn't really come up with anything. I mean, I've always had a big problem with stalling, and the shot clock has basically eliminated that. So now I'm totally good with the speed of the game. Nothing really comes to mind in terms of a rule change, not to me anyway, that would make the game more entertaining. So suffice it to say that in terms of just rule changes, lacrosse is looking pretty good right now. Would you agree?
Yeah, yes, and I just thought of something since we've been talking about rules. The only remember we talked about how the middies run on and off the field when they change from offense to defense.
Right.
I think that slows the game down a little bit, but I don't know how to fix it. So they're doing what if they can do that efficiently, great. If they can't, they're going to get you're going to get scored on. So it's still way faster than it used to be.
Okay, fair enough. Worst weather you've ever played in, whether it's in high school or college?
Oh, I've done this more than once. That's probably high school more because I played a lot more in high school. An absolute driving rain. And that'll go to I think we're going to go to the next question.
Right,
Funniest thing I've ever seen in a game.
Yeah, let's hear that.
So anyway, playing goalie in a driving downpour it's fun and it's not fun because, the 18 feet that I'm working in the crease area, it just becomes a mud puddle. It is, your feet stick to the ground. It's really hard to move. And, being as old as I am, very little AstroTurf around those days. So you're definitely playing in it's just muck. It's awful. So funniest thing I've ever seen in a game is I got a guy, I don't remember, it was high school, coming down. He's going to shoot a really hard overhand bounce shot. Never bounced. It's stuck in the mud at the top of the crease. It was like, well, crap. All right, let me dig that out and we'll clear it. So that was funny.
Right. So you dig it out. So in a situation, well, actually that hard rubber ball, the mud wouldn't really stick on it. Even if you threw it, it would probably,
No, it's the lacrosse ball is pretty, hard rubber, slick. Yeah. So there's, the mud's not sticking on it, but he just hit it into such a puddle of muck.
Right. It just never came out.
It just never came out.
That's funny.
Bad stuff.
All right. All right. Well, listen, Bob, that's going to take us to the end of our conversation. I really appreciate you sharing some of your insights around the Navy lacrosse team and then your own personal experiences. So thanks again very much, and we'll catch up with you soon.
All right. Thanks, Carl.
Take care, man. Okay, coming up next, we have our question of the day and midwatch segments. This is Carl Darden, and you're listening to Navy Sports Central. All right, it is time for our question of the day, and just like we always do, let's go ahead and check out our results from our previous question. As you'll recall, it had to do with the Navy Star Series, and here's how the question went. As of right now, there are 10 stars still up for grabs in the competition. Knowing that Navy just needs 5 to clinch the series, how many do you think they'll get? And our choices were A, less than 5, meaning they'll either lose or tie at best, B, exactly 5, C, 6, D, 7, and E, more than 7. So it looks like most of you went with 7. There were 76% of you who chose that option. That was followed by 6 stars, and there were 19% of you who think the mids will hit that number. And then finally, 3% of you are confident that they can take more than 7 stars. Looks like there weren't any votes for exactly 5 or less than 5. So obviously, since this podcast was released, Navy teams have locked up 2 more stars in men's basketball and wrestling, and they currently lead the competition at 10-7. And by the way, that win in wrestling was huge, just like I mentioned before. So now there's 7 stars out there in men's and women's track, tennis, and lacrosse, in addition to baseball. So the mids need to snag 3 of them to take the series for the 9th straight year. And those last 7 stars will be decided in April. Okay, so now let's get to our question for this episode. The Navy men's lacrosse team's top 3-point producers are Patrick Skalniak with 48 points, Dane Swanson with 38, and Henry Tolker with 34. So that comes to 120 points that they combined for in the 2022 season. The question is, how many points do you think this group will combine for in 2023? And here's a little bit of a hint. They've actually got a total of 18 altogether so far. Your choices are going to be A, less than 110 points, B, between 110 and 120 points, C, 121 to 130, and D, more than 130. Take some time to think about that and let me know your answer. And you can do that by going to the Navy Sports Nation group Facebook page. It should be up by the end of the day. And you can also email me at carld@navysportsnation.com. All right, now let's go ahead and wrap things up by checking in with our athletes on the midwatch. And I'm here to tell you that both were instrumental in the mids defending their Patriot League swimming and diving titles. Let's start with Jonah Harm. He competed in the 400-yard medley relay, which the mids won, and then in the preliminaries of the 100-yard butterfly, he set a meet and league record with a time of 45.58 seconds. He also won the final with a time of 45.87. Harm also swam the 200 freestyle relay, helping the mids to another first-place finish. His fourth event was the 100-yard backstroke, where he took 3rd place there. And then finally, he handled Navy's first leg of that incredible 400-yard freestyle relay that I spoke about in the sports update. For that outstanding performance, Harm was named the swimmer of the meet. Now we have Lauren Walsh, and I've got to say that she handled her first Patriot League championship like a swimmer who'd been there several times already. She swam 5 events, and keep in mind that most of these had preliminary rounds, so Walsh was in the water quite a bit. She helped the mids record a win in the 800 freestyle relay and then a 2nd place finish in the 400 medley relay. She also took 2nd place in the 200 individual medley and the 100-yard breaststroke, and then finally she closed things out in style by winning the 200-yard breaststroke. Those results earned Walsh the Rookie of the Meet on the women's side, so congratulations to her. And just think, we've got 3 more years of this to look forward to. That's going to do it for this edition of Navy Sports Central. Thank you all so much for joining us. Now, if you like what you've heard, be sure to follow us wherever you get your podcasts, and remember to spread the word to all the other Navy fans out there. Once again, I'd like to thank my good friend Bob Carolla from the class of '83 for joining us today. It was great to get his perspective as a former goalie on the Navy men's lacrosse team, in addition to sharing some of his experiences. We have been getting a great response to our question of the day, so if you want to jump in on that, just go to the Navy Sports Nation group Facebook page. I will go ahead and pin it to the top so you won't miss it. And just a quick reminder, the views expressed on Navy Sports Central are my own and do not reflect those of the U.S. Naval Academy or Navy Athletics. By the way, the music used in Navy Sports Central comes to you courtesy of Audio Jungle. This is a great site for purchasing the rights to use music from thousands of artists around the world, and those we feature in the podcast will be credited in our show notes. Talk to you soon, everybody. Until next time, this is Carl Darden. Go Navy, beat Army.